So, wir starten wieder. Wir sind leider etwas spät.
So, we're about to begin. We're running a bit
Aber wir
late,
kriegen es hin.
but we'll manage.
Wir würden versuchen, nach
So,
dem
the
Vortrag
idea
von Tim ein
is
Gruppenbild
that
zu
we'd
machen. Mal
try to
gucken, ob
take
wir
a
es
group
hinbekommen.
photograph after
Also
Tim's
draußen
presentation. We'll
einfach
see
ein
whether we'll
Stückchen nach oben
manage. So that would just be
laufen,
outside,
probieren,
walking
dort
up the
einfach
hill
ein
a
Bild
little
zu machen.
bit and try to take a picture of everyone together.
Ja, ich gebe einfach das
So, why don't
Mikrofon jetzt
I
mal
pass
weiter
the microphone
für
to
unsere nächste,
the next speaker for
sagt
our
man da?
next, what is
Eine
it
junge Dame,
called?
die
To
den
a young
nächsten
lady
Referenten
who will
vorstellt.
announce our next speaker.
Ja, hallo, ich
Yes,
bin
hello,
Caroline,
I'm
bin
Caroline,
22 Jahre
I'm
alt,
22
komme aus
years
Ostbevern.
old, I
Das
come
ist
from
ein Ort zwischen
Ostbevern,
Münster und
that's a
Osnabrück, im
place
schönen
somewhere between
Münsterland.
Münster and
Genau,
Osnabrück.
und jetzt,
And
übergebe
right,
ich
and this
mal,
is where I pass
an Tim
the floor
Hartshorne, der
to
uns jetzt
Tim
den nächsten Vortrag
Hartshorne
halten
for
wird.
his next
Wir
presentation.
haben jetzt einen Vortrag
So he will
gehalten,
talk
wie man ein Kind
about
mit CHARGE
how
Syndrom
to
überhaupt
raise
ist.
a child with CHARGE
Viel
syndrome.
Spaß.
Enjoy.
Thank you so much. So welcome. I've been doing a series of talks for a school in Pennsylvania in the United States on Zoom, and one of the topics that they asked me to address was kind of a survival guide for parents raising children with CHARGE syndrome, and so I gave that quite a bit of thought, and I put this together. It doesn't have all the answers because, well, we've all survived so far, right? So I guess we're doing okay. Congratulations. It's not an easy process, but I think yesterday in my presentation, I talked towards the end about the marathon skills because I pointed out that raising a child with CHARGE is not a sprint. If you try to run fast and manage to do it for the rest of your life, which is why you're raising a child with CHARGE, you're not going to make it. So what are the marathon skills that we need in order to survive? So that's kind of where I'm going. If you're here yesterday, you know I mess up because I got to advance both computers. I will try not to mess up today. So that's a picture of my family. This is about 15 years ago. I didn't calculate. It's been 15 years for several years, so I don't know how old it is. But yeah, and it's, you know, family is what it's all about. And my oldest son there on the left with his wife. The boy in the back, he's now married. So things have changed, but you know, we work well together, which isn't an easy feat in any family, but when you add someone with CHARGE syndrome into the mix, what's that like? And I can just say, because I'm so proud, you know, if I would ask my children, hey, would you go get something for me? They say, Dad, get it yourself, not now, we're busy. If I said, would you go get something for Jacob? They'd go, right? Is that kind of an experience, which I just love. They should care more about helping him out than me. That's just the way it should be. So here are the marathon skills, and I began with this, almost ended with this slide yesterday, but didn't go through it. Ann Turnbull is the person who came up with these set of skills. She was actually, I think, the step-parent of a young man with Down syndrome, and was a professor of special education in the United States. And I love her article here because it just resonated with me that this is a marathon. We have to pace ourselves. We can't just run fast or we'll collapse. So these are the skills, and I'm going to just read them now, but I'm going to go through kind of each one of them as I've thought about how to implement those in my life, maybe in your life. One is to meet basic needs, know yourself and your family, love your child unconditionally, establish relationships, experience and benefit from emotions, take charge, which was my topic yesterday, anticipate future transitional planning, and finally establish balance. And I often say to audiences, if you figure out how to establish balance in your life, would you let me know? Because I'm still working on that one, but I'll share my thoughts with you. So the first one is meeting basic needs. And one of the things that Ann Turnbull points out is that if you don't, as a parent, meet your basic needs, you're of no use to anybody. All right, and you're probably familiar, many of you, if not all of you, with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And the basic needs, physiological needs like food, water, warmth, rest, and security and safety. If you're not taking care of yourself, you're useless to anybody. But it's easy for a parent, I know, to say, well, I will sacrifice everything for this child. And if I have to go without, that's all right, because my child needs whatever I can possibly provide them. And I understand the motivation there because I've been there. My son's 33, we're still on the marathon. But seriously, we only go through life once. I've often thought about, if I go back and redo that part of it, well, you can't, right? It's only one time through. If you're not taking care of yourself, what use are you? If you don't eat properly, drink lots of water, take care of your safety, and you don't make it, how is that helping your child? But I think it even goes beyond some of the basic needs into some of the psychological needs, if not self-fulfillment. So for a while, my wife was very much into Taekwondo, and she became a third-degree black belt, which meant that, yes, dear, whatever you want, dear, just don't beat me up, dear. It's like, that's how I had to deal with it. But then, I think it's my first time at the castle, and I couldn't believe I was in a castle. And she'd say, Tim, you're always traveling, you're always going places. Yeah, well, it meets some of my if it's not basic needs, it's certainly psychological needs. I mean, when she wanted to go out to Taekwondo practice, and she'd say, well, do you mind staying home with Jacob? I'd say, no, not at all. I mean, it was good to me that she was getting out and doing something, because just staying home to sacrifice for Jacob was not going to be good for any of us. The other way around, sure, Tim, go to Germany and have a great time. It didn't go over really well, but still, I recognize this is something that I wanted to do, that I needed to do, it was important to do. So if you're in a couple relationship, facilitating that opportunity for your partner so that they can meet some of their basic needs in life, really, really important. What do you do? What do you like to do? The second skill was know yourself and your family. So knowing yourself is part of knowing yourself is knowing that this is what's important to me in my life. And yes, I'm willing to sacrifice whatever I have to for my child. But if I can also meet some of what makes life interesting, gives me passion, helps me be motivated to continue on with life, then let's facilitate that in one another. By the way, she no longer does Taekwondo. She's on to pottery. And it turns out she's a really good potter. So that's really cool. And I'm on to doing as little as possible. So I think about family strengths and needs. As they say, know yourself and your family. What are your values as a family? Do you value the arts? Do you value camping? Do you value serving the community? What are the passions of everybody within that family? Usually in a family there are a certain degree of shared values. But even if they're not that shared, what are my partner's key values? What are my values? What are my other children's values? Because I want to facilitate a quality life for everybody. Coping strategies. So we all cope a little bit differently, right? One of the ways that my wife copes is to isolate herself from time to time. She just has to get away from the noise. And she can go into our bedroom and she can sit in there by herself for a period of time. That's her coping strategy. If I'm trying to interfere with that and say, now wait a minute, Nancy, I need you out here, blah, 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 that's not going to help anybody. I know this about her. She also knows I need to eat pretty regularly, because if I'm not eating regularly, I get in a foul mood. And she says, Tim, you're angry, you have to eat. I am not. Shut up. Right, but she's right. I need to eat. And then I'm nice again. So what are our coping strategies? What are our resources as a family? You know, Nancy and I were both school psychologists when Jacob was born. And I decided this was the first time in history that having parents who were both psychologists could have been a good thing. Otherwise, I'm not so sure I'd want that. You know? But we knew a lot about special education services. We knew how to get them. We knew what they were. We knew how to advocate. You know, the very first meeting we actually attended with the school people, and the director of special education said, well, first of all, this physical therapist said he can really benefit from physical therapy. And the director said, okay, we can give him a half hour every other week. I said, excuse me? She just said he really can benefit from physical therapy. Is a half hour every other week going to benefit him? Well, that's what we can provide. But wait a minute, you know, this doesn't make any sense. He needs physical therapy, a half hour every other week. I hate to go to due process and through the legal channels about this, but if he needs it, he should get it. Oh yeah, there's someone else who could do physical therapy, so suddenly he was the first kid to get weekly physical therapy, right? And we need to do that because we have those resources. Not everybody has those resources, but other people have different kinds of resources. Some people are very good about getting into somebody's face because they know how to do that. Other people know how to access, you know, social services or go talk to the government about what is needed. And we all have things we can draw upon, and one of the biggest resources, of course, is family. So extended family, parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, wherever you can find those resources. Really important. Pressure points, you know, what are those places where those things fall apart, things collapse, right? And one of the ones that's pretty clear, I think, to many of us is when no one sleeps. So a lot of kids with CHARGE don't sleep very well. And so what happens? Who stays up, right? And of course, the wife should stay up. We all know that, right? Don't hit me, no. Actually, you know, we took turns, but I mean that neither one of us had much sleep. That's a pressure point. That's when the arguments can start because we're both worn out. So knowing what the pressure points are in the family helps you to work to prevent those or recognize that it's starting to happen and we need to do something. This is a different situation, but when Nancy and I got married, I had 2 kids and she had 1 kid. And she got pregnant with Jacob during that first year. But I remember trying to deal with her kid, who was a brat, and my kid, who were angels. No, that wasn't true. But trying to deal with the conflict between the kids almost drove us apart. And I remember saying to Nancy, we need to talk, because otherwise I don't know if this marriage is going to work. And so we sat down and talked. And we worked things through. We figured things out. And boy, I think they helped us when Jacob was born, because we already knew how to have that conversation. Joys. You know, I will say to you very honestly, Jacob's been the greatest blessing of my life. I've learned more about myself, about what I do, about what life means. I mean, everything that's happened to me that's good in my life is because of Jacob. So thank you, Jacob. You're wonderful. There are real joys that come along from having a kid with CHARGE syndrome. Some days those are hard to identify, right? But if you look at your life and look at what you are getting from the experience, one of which is being here with all of us, right? I mean, if that isn't a joy, what is? So once in a while, in the middle of the hardship, it's useful to look at, well, what have I gotten? What is great about my life at this point in time? Because we need to find that spark, right? There's been a lot of research on family needs. Oh, thank you. You didn't need to know that? Okay, family needs. in different studies, sometimes these are used and people rank order them. And you can think for your own self what you need most of. But the one that does tend to emerge most frequently is the number one need is information. I need to know more about this. I need to know where to get services. I need to know what the medical issues are. I need to know what the future might be like. I need to... So much to know. And of course, what do? They give you a stack of pamphlets and information sheets, which I know we had a whole stack we never looked at because it wasn't very useful to us. But we always wanted more information, which is a reason why we come to these conferences over and over again, because we're going to get some more information to help us. Family and/or social support. How do I support the siblings? How much do you worry about the siblings? By the way, my own research on siblings, they tend to do pretty well. Not always, not 100%, but most siblings actually will say that they value their sibling with charge and are fine with the life that they have. So that's kind of a good thing to know. But where do you find the support if they're not? And where do you find the support that your family needs in times of crisis? What happens when your kid goes to the hospital? Who's watching the other kids? How does that get worked out, right? I mean, there are all things like that we need to know where the resources are. Accessing community services tends to be number 3. As I said yesterday, there's no book out there that says, here's the list of resources. Or maybe there is in some communities, but here's the list of resources available to you. And if you have a kid with charge, do this one, this one, this one, and this one. It'd be nice to have that. Help explaining to others. Have you ever gotten tired explaining charge syndrome to other people? It's not an easy thing to describe either. Well, deafblind, but that just begins to scratch the surface, right? And sometimes people are so intrusive in their questions. On the other hand, there are other times I wish they would ask. So, it's hard to satisfy me. But the way to explain it, which doesn't sound, what's the response? I have a son here with disabilities due to charge syndrome. Oh, I'm so sorry. But the other thing you get is, oh, but Tim, you're so strong. Do you want to hit them when they say you're so strong? I'm not strong, right? We are coping. We're doing what has to be done. It's not because we are it's not because you got a kid with charge because you're so strong, right? If you're strong, it's because you had to learn how to be strong to cope with the situations that you find yourself in. But when someone says, you're so strong, it sounds like, that's why you do this, because I never could. Oh, I hate that one. Financial assistance. Every country's a little bit different on that. United States is a mess. It helps if you know how to work the system. It helps if you have the financial resources to go to federal court and demand that you get something that they've taken away from you, which we did. And we won in federal court, but that took a lot. It took so much. It's so frustrating. The assistance should be provided to people who need it. On the other hand, there was one time when we had respite services. We give a certain amount of money, and I said to the social worker, well, there's not much money out there. Maybe you should give it to some other child in our area who could, has more needs than Jacob and could use that better. And she looked at me and said, your son is the most needy individual we have in the county. I said, oh, I didn't know that. And then childcare. Do you dare leave your kid in the company of somebody else? Probably not a 13-year-old girl. But how do you find the people that you trust? And there are people out there who don't trust anybody and never go out, never leave their home because they don't dare have their child looked after by somebody else. It's a hard one to sort out. I appreciate the concerns that they have, but I also know that if Nancy and I don't get out once in a while, or didn't in the old days, we would not have survived as a couple. We needed that time. So we had to find people we could trust. Unfortunately, we did. We found some people who were very good at child care. Okay, courage is not denial, but sometimes courage looks like denial to other people. I'll explain that, but that's a poster that one of Jacob's caregivers came up with one time. Let's identify things that Jacob can do. I mean, how many times do people focus on what your kid can't do? And there are probably lots of things your kid can't do. Lots of things Jacob can't do. Jacob's at the lower end of CHARGE syndrome. But, you know, there are things that he can do. Use the seatbelt in the car without you checking on him. In fact, he's just recently started buckling other people in. It's just kind of funny. Come on, Dad, get the buckle in him. He's not vocal, so he doesn't say that. It's kind of hard to read, isn't it? But shut cupboard of a cupboard. Shut the door of a cupboard. He can turn light switches on. It's one of his favorite things to turn light switches on. But you focus on what he can do as opposed to what he can't do. This thing about the courage looks like denial to other people. How many of you, I don't know if this is a good question to ask or not. So there's a questionnaire out there called the Questionnaire on Resources and Stress. It's a measure of how damaged we are as parents by having a child with disabilities, basically. And there are questions like that, like, I wish my child could be different. Now, if you say yes to that, you're really stressed. If you say no to that, you're probably a damn liar. I mean, right? I mean, don't you wish your kid didn't have to deal with these kinds of disability issues? Does that necessarily make you stressed? I mean, I think the questionnaire is crazy because it punishes the courage to face the challenges that we have as opposed to denying that we have them. I could go through that and deny that. You know, I should have brought the questionnaire with me. You know, there's one that says Jacob can ride a bus. Is this a true, false thing? Well, not by himself, right? So how do I even answer that one? There's one about I worry about his future. Well, if I say yes, I'm really stressed. I can't. If I say no, I'm not worried about his future. I'm in denial. You know, I'm totally in denial. So this whole thing gets all messed up in the way the researchers view us sometimes. Is it tough? It's absolutely tough, but when we have the courage to face the difficulties, to recognize the difficulties, not run away from the difficulties, but to sit down and say, okay, what are we going to do about this situation? That's what we're really going for. That's the courage. That's the courage that we all need to be able to move forward. So some of the other professional misunderstandings and parent binds, the binds they put us in. It seems like when the professionals see us at our low moments, which occurs, right? We have our low moments. And they see, oh, these parents are so unhappy and discouraged. They really need help. But then they see us in our happy and optimistic notions. Yeah, things are great. Things are moving along. We're taking care of the... Then, you know, they see us as being in denial. How do you escape being viewed as unhappy, discouraged, depressed versus completely in la-la land where you're just crazy because you think everything is just fine? I know that when Jacob was a baby, they wanted to put hearing aids in him. We didn't think they helped. But the audiologist was so concerned that we were this discouraged family that really need to be motivated and pushed and, oh yeah, let's keep on with the hearing aids. They're great. It's going to be wonderful. Versus us saying, yeah, he's stone deaf. It's okay. You know, it's fine. He can't hear anything. We know that. So what we used to do, we live in a small town relatively, and we occasionally see his audiologist around town. We would carry his hearing aids in his baby bag. Oh, there's Linda, quick. Put the hearing aids on and say, yes, things are going really great, Linda. Yeah, we're trying them. it's hard to deal with that because they are always pinholing us. It's like being an over-involved versus an under-involved parent. An under-involved parent forgets to show up for meetings, which I said yesterday we did for our first meeting with the school. We just forgot. Oh, these parents, they can't be bothered, right? Versus the over-involved parent, that's the one that shows up at school, not just once, twice, shows up frequently and says, I want to make sure things are going okay. What's happening in the classroom? I want to know. I think maybe this should be, you're over-involved. You're either over-involved or under-involved. I don't know how you can manage that otherwise. I remember Nancy and I were at a meeting one time with school psychologists, and there was a speaker, and somebody asked a question of the speaker and said, what do you do about the over-involved parents, da-da-da-da? I thought I was going to have to peel Nancy off the ceiling. She was so angry about people talking about over-involved parents. What do you want? You want me to be involved in my child's life or not involved in my child's life? No, we want you to be involved when we want you to be involved. And when we don't want you to be involved, we want you to be under-involved. It's just nuts. It's so hard for us to get it right for them. So I choose to forget about them and don't care too much. Though I train my school psychology students to understand that a parent who comes to school is not an over-involved parent, they're a concerned parent. And the first thing you need to do is listen to that parent to understand their concerns. And then, address them in any way that you want to. But if we don't listen to us, they don't get us. And they probably don't get our child. So it's so important to help them to understand, I'm not over or under-involved. I'm not completely unhappy and depressed, nor am I saying things as being perfect. Because none of that's true. I'm just a regular human being trying to struggle through the complexities of raising a child. So the problem for us is how to love our child with no need for our child to be any different, without giving up hope that our child may progress with time and resources. That's almost contradictory, because I have to be able to say, Jacob, if you never get any different, never learn any new skills, never progress in any way, it's okay. You're you. You should be you, and not just have to live up to whatever expectations I have. I will love you the way you are. But at the same time, you're over there advocating for change. You're pushing people to help your child to develop. You're making sure that he's not being lost in any point of his educational or social program. It's so hard to do that simultaneously. Strong advocate, accepting. But I think it's essential, because if we are not satisfied, if we cannot accept, if we don't unconditionally love our child for who they are at the moment that they are, then all of our fighting is just to satisfy our needs, not our kids' needs. Get that? It's like, Jacob, I think you can do better, but I will love you if you don't. But I will help you in any way I can to progress. But if you don't, it's okay. It is really contradictory, and it's really hard to pull off. But I think it's absolutely essential. Absolutely essential. I know when Nancy and I thought of this years ago, it was hard to get to that acceptance part, because we wanted so much for Jacob, as we do for all our children. But, he is who he is, and he'll develop if he develops. Well, we're going to help any way we can. Yeah, it's, I think I've probably struggled with that more than anything else over the years, because I haven't given up hope yet that he will continue to gain. But if he doesn't, it's okay. Sense of community. One of the things Nancy and I talk a lot about is the importance of Jacob being part of his community. I mean to do this one first, then I'll remember. We are social beings. That defines us as humans. We are social beings. We cannot live without society, without community. I mean, what would you do if there were no doctors and grocers? We need everybody, right? We can't live just by ourselves. But what does it mean to have that sense of being a part of a community that we want for ourselves as well as we want for Jacob? Well, membership. I want to feel like I'm a member of my community, that I actually belong there, that people see me and don't wonder why I'm there because how did you come to be a part of this community? No, they know I'm a member. I have membership rights. I want that for Jacob too. I want when Jacob goes around town to people to think, oh yeah, there goes Jacob. We know him. He's a part of our community. How do you get that for him? Well, we got there through Circle of Friends, I think, primarily. So in kindergarten, identifying the kids who like Jacob and formalizing a circle of friends, and they were with him. Actually, they were interested in him. There's some have still come back and visit him. But it started the idea that he's known in his community because these kids would do stuff with him. And then other people over the years have gotten to know Jacob. I mean, his caregivers will take him to a large grocery store. And they say almost every time someone comes up and says, hi, Jacob. They don't know who they are. I'm not sure I would know who they were either. But it doesn't matter. That's membership in the community. Influence. So can you influence what your community does, the way your community functions? If things aren't going well, do you have the influence to change the way things are going in the community? And does Jacob influence his community? I honestly think he has done that over the years through his circle of friends. But beyond that, too, as people have seen who Jacob is and what he contributes just by being there. Certainly his caregivers. I mean, several of them have said, of all my teachers in college, he was the best one. He's the one I learned from and have carried with me through life, especially those going into teaching or speech pathology or physical therapy, but others as well that he has taught me so much. So there's influence. Does being a member of the community fulfill some of your needs? You know, again, we need affiliation. We need to be able to see people. So is it a benefit to me to go out into my community and engage with other people in some form or other? I'm rather shy and introverted, so I do it differently than some people do it. But still, you know, I like to feel like, living where I live, being with the people who I associate with, that's meaningful to me. It meets some basic needs that I have for just being recognized. I don't know whether that's a need for Jacob or not. It's really hard to tell. But it's available to him. And then a shared emotional connection with people that you know. And that's where sometimes it's a struggle, I think, for us. Because who in your community shares the emotional experience that you have had in raising a child with CHARGE? And when you find those people, you know, it's the most wonderful thing. You kind of latch on because here we share something so profound, it doesn't even need to be described in words. I mean, meet another family of a child with CHARGE. Sure, we have different backgrounds and different experiences, and our kids aren't exactly the same. But at some level, we know each other, right? And among many other reasons, that's why these meetings are so incredibly important, and why after I finally shut up, you should go outside and get your picture taken, because people are finding themselves, there I am. I don't think I'm even in this one. I think I was upstairs looking down. But I love this photo, and I have others from other conferences, but this is what we need. We need one another. We can't, going through this by ourselves is too difficult. So think about that shared emotional connection. I was in an airport one time and I was feeding Jacob through a tube. So this was a while ago. And there was a guy across the aisle from me who was staring at me the whole time I was feeding Jacob. Well, you kind of get used to that, right? But when I finished, he got up and walked over and said, I spent years doing that for my son. Amazing, sudden, connection. We know something, we share something, it's an important thing. We didn't talk any further than that, but you didn't have to, because I knew why he was staring. I had some sense of what was going on in his head. And I don't know whether his kid was alive or not, but I knew that we shared something important. One of the things on the list of marathon skills was benefiting from emotions, experiencing and benefiting from emotions. So I asked the experts, I posted the Facebook group and said, tell me about your experience with emotions, and has sharing emotions been useful to you, or experiencing emotions been useful to you? I thought some of these were really interesting. So as a baby, it was fear and worry, with all the diagnoses, surgeries, not knowing what was next, not knowing how well she could see or hear, and just observing and waiting, but pure joy when she hit a milestone. Other parents don't notice the little kinds of changes that happen in their kids. They happen too fast. We see them, one little change, one little nuanced difference, and we pick it up and say, yay! And maybe you don't call up your friends and say, my kid just gave me a social smile for the first time. They're 5 years old. But we can call one another, right? Because we know what a milestone that is. As a kid, stress and worry as she enters school in a general education classroom. Will peers accept her? Will she make friends? They do, she does. Stress for IEPs and battling with school to get her what she needs to have equal access. This takes so much time and preparation. Yeah. So much time and preparation. Such a struggle, such a fight, which should never be a fight, but it has to be a fight. That's where you're going to fight like heck to help your kid progress if they can. Always worry, never knowing what the future holds for her. She is 10 now, and I question if she will go to college or be able to drive, if she will be able to live on her own. We all question that, and some of the kids succeed and some don't, but lots of emotions around those issues. From my point of view, now I appreciate every step, simple things. I have different priorities. I try to be more patient, kind. I think there are a lot of benefits to emotions. But I am totally different from a mother who raises only typical children, a little bit weird. That was hard to read, wasn't it? I'll give you a moment here. How many of you are a little bit weird? How many of you are a lot weird? Embrace the weirdness. It's who we are. It's all good. Yes, I learned to turn my hurt and anger into advocacy, and both me and my child have benefited from it. So what do we do? I think if you block your emotions, you're just going to die. You're just going to be so stressed out. But if you can turn those emotions into actions, into things that need to happen, brilliant. Because that's what we motivate ourselves by having I'm worried about what this doctor's going to say, so I'm going to turn that meeting with the doctor into something where I'm going to be satisfied that I'm getting exactly what I want to get from that meeting. That's, I think, the way we really benefit from our emotions. Okay, that's pretty much my talk from yesterday, waiting for the case manager. The person's going to come along and take charge and make all the decisions for us. Yay. Because I don't know how to do any of this. Do you know when they sent Jacob home from the hospital and they gave us 20-minute training on apnea monitor, suction machine, gavage feeding, sticking the tube down his nose into his stomach so we could feed him? 20 minutes of training. I'm surprised he lived. I'm surprised we lived. I'm a bit overwhelmed by all the booklets, leaflets, handouts, manuals. To say we just stacked those in the corner and never looked at them until we finally recycled them. All these medical people tell me things, and I only understand part, and they don't talk to each other. They really don't talk to each other. And of course, if you seem to understand, Then they say, "Are you a nurse?" I will do better. Not much left, so. I know there are programs and services in my community, but I don't know what they are or how to access them. Case manager, please come and tell me what I can. They don't show up. There has to be someone who can manage all of this. And there isn't. It's you, right? And that's one of those parenting skills, survival skills, is I just figure out that if my kid's going to do all right, it's going to be because we're going to take charge and manage it. Get organized. You know, how many socks do you have strewn around your house? I don't know. Very hard to get organized. This is actually a group helping us organize Jacob's house because we bought this house next door to us when the lady finally died. She was 95. And we had a meeting of people who loved Jacob, and we asked them for their ideas of what should go into his house. But getting organized is like our problem solving every day. You kind of wake up and say, wonder what's going to be the big problem today. You know, the school calls, and what am I going to have to say with them? I knew one family that just stopped answering the phone in the morning because the school always called with some kind of concern. Yeah, let them deal with it. Communication within the family, communication with other people that we need their help and support from. Networking, which I'm going to talk about in another slide here in a second, but knowing how to create networks of people to support what I need. It's collaboration, working with other people as equals to try to solve the problems that we're facing. Education, becoming better educated for what my child needs. That's why you're here. Community organizing. If it doesn't exist in your community, can you start it in your spare time? Persistence, not giving up. This last one, trusting your gut. That means trusting yourself to know what's best. And that's really hard when the medical people and the educational people are saying things you don't think are right. And you are just a parent after all, which means that you know more about your child than anybody else knows, and should have some confidence in that, because they're not always right. The doctors can be wrong. The educational people can be wrong. They don't like to admit it, but I don't care if they admit it. I'm just going to tell them when they're wrong, right? Because we have to support our child. That's a really hard one. Nancy spoke yesterday about person-centered planning. But in terms of preparing for the future, anticipating the future and transitional planning, it's person-centered planning. You know, and Nancy pointed out yesterday, we did this first PCP was in kindergarten when she said someday he's going to live independently in his own home. And I rolled my eyes. This is stupid. That's not going to happen. Well, guess what? He lives not independently exactly, but independent of us in his own home, with 24/7 caregivers. But I don't think that would have happened if Nancy hadn't had that as an objective way back in kindergarten, because it's something that takes some planning and working towards. It's hard. We get really focused on the present issues. So I was really at one time very concerned about preschool issues, then became elementary school issues, then secondary school issues. Now it's post-secondary issues, moving on into adult issues. As I've followed Jacob growing up, because we're so focused and have so much to do, it's hard to say, but the next one's going to be this. We have to be preparing ourselves for that. But if we don't do it, the transition will not necessarily go well. Okay, networking. I'll give you an example of it, first of all. One of the needs in the States, at least, people get a lot of equipment. They get wheelchairs. They get IV stands. They get walkers. They get all this equipment for their child, which their child often outgrows and doesn't need anymore. One of the problems in getting all that equipment, I don't know what it's like here in Germany, but they told me in the United States to get a wheelchair will take you a year. I thought, that's stupid. It took a year, right? And by the time we got one, Jacob no longer needed it. So there was a woman in our area who said, I'm going to start a lending locker. I'm going to acquire all this equipment from people who will donate their old wheelchairs and IV stands and suction machines and whatever, and I will loan them out to people until they can get their own. That's brilliant networking, and we actually used it quite a bit while waiting for equipment. What are the needs out there? That's networking. What are the needs? Are there some resources that could help address those needs? And let's link those resources to the needs. So when you identify a need within your family, say, we really need to be able to get to do this or access that. What are the resources out there? And then can you link, not just for you, but for other people, those needs with the resources available? Maybe even create it yourself. It's so helpful because, and that's why, the kids are standing up and saying, let's get together and bond. Because they're trying to network, trying to support one another. And we can do the same. So balancing the life tasks. As I said, balancing one's life is not always an easy thing to do, particularly when you're so incredibly busy. When we think about work needs, we work. We need to be productive at work. We don't want to lose our job at work. So, but if all I do is work all the time, I'm missing something. I'm not a very balanced life. Friends. I don't mean the number of friends that you have, but are you a friendly person? Do you get along with individuals? Do you go shopping and are friendly with people at the store? I mean, that's part of us all getting along as a community. Extremely important, but hard to do when we're very task-oriented. Love. We need to commit to family. And that's not always an easy thing when our family creates pain within us. And not just pain because of dysfunction in the family. It can be pain around the concern about our child, especially a child with CHARGE, doing well and making it in the world. But we can't focus on just one of those. All three of them are important in our lives. And so that's the kind of the balancing of the life tasks. Work sometimes changes due to the child's needs. I've known people who have changed jobs in our country just to get health insurance, but sometimes moving to be closer to a better school. I'm not saying we should do that ever, but some people just can't work. How many, I'm not a show of hands, but a lot of women give up employment when they have a child with CHARGE because they just don't. Someone has to be home. I don't know why it has to be the woman. And it's not always the woman. Sometimes men have given up their careers for the child with CHARGE. Just less often, but it happens. Friends may no longer have the friends I once enjoyed. People think if you have a child with CHARGE, it could be catching, and they might get a kid with CHARGE too. I don't know what they think, but the avoidance is very painful. When people that I used to associate with no longer want to associate with me because now I have a kid with CHARGE, that's really rough. But you look around and suddenly I have a whole new group of friends, And actually they're, as far as I'm concerned, better friends because they get it. They're not afraid of me. They know how to be supportive without intrusive, and I can find ways to support them. It's magnificent. Love may be a challenge to my marriage and family. The divorce rate for families of kids with CHARGE is not real high, but it's a little bit higher than average. The stress is there. I've known men who have deserted their families. I've known women who have deserted their families. And that's, of course, really sad. But many people have found, after the child with CHARGE was born, I used to do fathers groups all the time, and I would get the fathers in a circle, and I would ask them, so what's the best thing that's happened to you because you had a child with CHARGE? And so many of them have said, as they went around the circle, I don't work all the time anymore. I spend more time with all my children. My wife and I have a new shared mission together. Our marriage is so stronger. Now, it's not going to be true for everybody because it takes two, right? But the opportunity is there sometimes for things to actually get better because we learned how to work together to solve a problem, to make sure we're taking care of all of our children. So it can be really terrific. So perfect courage is the courage to be imperfect. One of my favorite sayings is, we are all imperfect. Not one of you is going to do this perfectly. You're not going to be the perfect parent. You're not going to be the perfect advocate, the perfect spouse, perfect friend. No, we're imperfect. We struggle all the time. We just do the best we can. If I feel like, therefore, I'm a bad, horrible person, that doesn't help anybody. If I can accept the fact that I am imperfect, I have done the wrong thing with Jacob from time to time. It happens. My father used to say that one of the parents' jobs was to screw up their kids because kids need to develop the internal strength to cope on their own. So we don't have to be perfect parents. I don't have to be, right? But that courage to allow myself to be imperfect is really hard. As can be the courage to be a little bit weird. But life is about more than avoiding being weird, especially when we're weird anyway. So, as I said before, embrace the weirdness. Good tool for living. Contact information. I said the phone number doesn't work anymore because I just retired, but no one's going to call me anyway. But love to stay in touch. Feel free to contact me anytime. And thank you very much for listening to me.